Hi everyone, welcome back to Be Rich. It's me, Vinod. I'm here today to talk about gold, and a lot of you have been asking me something in private and in public in comments. Um, where is gold going? Are you going to see correction in gold? Are we reached some kind of a state where it's going to crack and gold is going to collapse? So before I get into that, I thought I must first explain where we are in the context of what is happening in the world, and that will finally help us understand what is happening with gold and maybe help us understand what to do when it comes to gold. That is the whole point of this video. So by end of the video, hopefully you will understand what I've said, and then you'll be able to make a decision if you should be buying more gold or if you should wait and watch and not buy more gold. That's the whole idea behind this. So what happened in this world when it comes to markets and money? There have been two significant events that happened, which in the recent past has created the world we live in. One, the end of World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made dollar the reserve currency of the world. Then, of course, in 1971, when Nixon did the famous Nixon Shock, that is, where he removed the last vestiges of gold standard and walked away from gold, took the dollar away from gold. So this currently the world is going through a similar shift is what a lot of people feel, and maybe in history, looking back in hindsight 20, 30 years from now, this will probably be labeled as something like that, like the Bretton Woods Agreement and the Nixon Shock. Probably this will call the Trump something or another. But anyway, so we're going through this right now, this watershed moment as far as the global economy is concerned. Why? You might be thinking, either I don't care, or you might be feeling like a lot of us, oh my God, we are going through this. But it is important to understand what we are going through, because if you understand what is happening, it's going to give you an opportunity rarely seen in our lifetimes, because we tend to live only for a limited amount of time. So these kind of things seldom come in human lifetimes. So this might create an opportunity for you to invest and make the kind of choices that you need to make to create some truly lasting wealth. That is the idea. So that is what we try to do in this channel anyways. So there is something known as the Triffin's dilemma, and this is what is happening. And this is said by, problem was identified by an economist, Belgian economist called Robert Triffin in the 1960s. So before I get into explaining what the dilemma is, let's say what's happening right now. Trump wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. That's been his whole preamble in his election. First cycle and the second cycle is to make America great again. And one of the tools this time around, what he's been working on, is the tariffs. And a lot of you have been seeing this tariffs. And what is it doing? What he's trying to do is actually weaken the dollar. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency and it's very strong. He's trying to weaken it, because by weakening the dollar, the American exports become competitive. That means there is an incentive to start manufacturing in the US, because if you manufacture in the US, exporting it from the US in the global market, the American goods start looking competitive because the dollar is weakened. But that is where the problem is. This is what he identified, this paradox. So you may feel that being the reserve currency is a blessing, but not everything, like what Trevor Noah used to say, not every blessing is truly a blessing. Every blessing also has a curse attached to it. So this blessing of being the reserve currency does have a major advantage. That means you print and everyone has to work to earn your currency. That's what basically the dollar is. They keep printing the currency, and the rest of the world, we work to earn the dollar, the mighty dollar. Remember, your dollar, our dollar, your problem, that famous book which I spoke about. So this is true. But the knock-on effect of this has been, like in all things in life, like we see in zoo animals, which I was telling Sadhu before we started the video, encouraging him to exercise every day. He was saying, I go walking to give the card to the other building. So that is my exercise. I said, that's not enough exercise, Sadhu. He said, well, that's better than nothing. That is what's happened to the US. The US having the reserve currency, they felt, why work? Why? The world is doing everything for us. We just have to keep giving dollars, and they keep giving us goods. So when that happened, like all zoo animals, like I was saying. We become lazy and fat, and the American economy started doing this. And this got accelerated during the 1970s, during the Nixon Shock. This meant more factories and more jobs left American shores, as you know, more of the world was consuming the dollar because we were printing more and more dollar. And the only way the US dollar could creep into the world economy everywhere and have influence is the dollar has to go there and sit there, right? So to do that, how does Americans enable this? It is done through trade deficit. The Americans buy more than they sell. So that way you have dollars stuck everywhere around the world. And what do these countries have to do with their dollar? They don't have any choice but to send it back to US and buy US treasury and US debt. And that allows Americans to keep borrowing and printing more dollars, you know the cycle. So this what has led to the American industrial base collapsing on its own weight. This is what I was saying. This is the Triffin dilemma, right? Factories have left, jobs have left, and foreign nations have all their reserves sitting in dollars, and the US debt, of course. This led to the Wall Street booming from the 1970s to now, the Wolf of Wall Street. All this happened, you know. So, a lot of wealth was created in the United States thanks to all this. And this has led to a problem. The US dollar reserve has actually become a tax on American factories and producers. So if you're an American businessman, or you're an American trying to do anything in the United States and trying to participate in a global economy, you have a tax being slapped on you, which is your reserve currency. Because your dollar is so strong, it is impossibly hard to do, fight in the global market for market space. This is very true for even Indians, when our rupee becomes a little stronger, you see Infosys shares, Tata shares, all IT shares and pharma shares taking a beating because the rupee has become stronger. That means they're getting less revenue. We analyze this and we say this, and we dump those stocks. In the same way, when the rupee becomes weaker and you're getting more rupee for a dollar, we say yay, and we run after these stocks because they earn more. So the same logic applies here, and this led to attention for the American government, which you've seen playing out year after year in election cycle. Now we finally have Trump, there is economic domestic needs for the Americans. At the same time, being a reserve currency means there are global outlook they have to keep, and they have to have stability for the international markets and the global trade. So they are straddled between two extremes. Imagine doing splits, like the famous Van Damme ad you've seen, the guy is doing splits on two trucks zooming down the highway. The American dollar is doing that, trying to keep balance. What happened? All this was going on, the COVID pandemic happened. Alas, we went into global lockdown. This is when things became from bad to worse, because when COVID pandemic happened, now a lot of you are looking back and not remembering it so fondly. Of course, I don't blame you, but there was an economic realization that happened to the Western world and the United States. They suddenly realized they are completely dependent on China for everything. The Americans did not have enough masks, enough medical equipment. All of this was in China. We were in a global lockdown. They could not get the shipments, and they could not figure this out, and they could not make anything overnight, create factories in the US to make masks. We remember how the toilet papers ran off the shelves in the United States. They were all worried about toilet papers. Yes, so that happened, and the Europeans and Americans realized that they have become excessively dependent on China over the years, thanks to this global currency and the tax that's been put on them. So their health, their technology, even their military needs is all based on Chinese and the Chinese supply. And right now the Americans are finding it hard to even produce critical goods which they need. The rare earth metals which we've been talking about, the rare earths. So even those elements, they've suddenly come to realize they need China to help them out. And this is the main reason why he cannot slap China around with tariffs the way he's doing with India, because we don't really supply them anything too much where they feel dependent on us. They can actually go get it somewhere else, and there are other ways we can send it to them. But the Chinese, they have such a grip on the supply of materials to the United States. They cannot piss them off too much. So it's more like a cajoling, which is what is happening, and you see it playing out. That is why a lot of you are wondering, why we are being punished so much for using Russian crude, but the Chinese who are using more Russian crude are not being punished because he can't afford to punish them. So what are they doing? Trump and his cohort in the cabinet. There's all this nonsense they're doing with the Fed, and beating. They're trying to somehow push the dollar down in a managed way. It's like flying very high. So they're trying to force the aircraft down without creating too much turbulence. So you see what's all happening. And this has already been happening. Chinese have realized this, and in the last 10 years, they've been slowly getting rid of US securities and moving towards gold, and they're accelerating this. They still have $3 trillion worth of American securities. It's not gone anywhere, still there, but they've been last 10 years slowly been getting rid of US securities and moving to gold. And they've been even encouraging the Chinese citizens to slowly buy more and more gold. Don't, after the real estate collapse there and what's happened there, they've been telling to encourage their citizens also to buy more and more gold, to the point we really do not know how much really the Chinese have, how much gold China actually has. There's actual projections that say the Chinese have 4 times more gold than they're actually saying. And that is a phenomenal amount of gold they're holding. So this has been going on. So just a few months back, me and Shashwat spoke that how gold has overtaken the euro and become the second most sought after reserve by central banks. And the dollar has actually fallen below 50% of central bank holdings for the first time this century. In the last 25 years, you have to go 25 years back to see the dollar being held in such low levels, because everyone's moving towards a neutral and universal asset, which is gold. Because gold, once everyone goes back to gold standards, which is what slowly is, we're not saying it, we're not saying de-dollarization, we're not saying gold standard, but everyone seems to be moving in the direction slowly. And you may be thinking this is bad for the US. It's not actually bad for the US that more and more gold is being used, and dollar becoming weaker. Like I said, export jobs and manufacturing can come back to American shores. So, and Americans are not low on gold. America has one of the highest holding reserves of gold. They have 261 million ounces of gold, or so they say. The reason why I'm saying so they say is they actually haven't audited their own gold for the last 60 years. So I'm sure they probably have more gold. If the Americans really look inside and go through their stockpile and take value, stock of their gold, they probably have more gold than what they're saying. And another funny thing is, on their balance sheet, government balance sheet in the United States, they have priced their gold at $42 an ounce. Imagine 8,133 tons of gold sitting there, and you're discounting it on your balance sheet and holding it $42 an ounce. And if they just rebalance their balance sheet and they say, well, let's put it to today's price where gold is, that is 3,400 an ounce, this would create an immediate rebalancing of their balance sheet and infuse $850 billion. So they have, a lot of things, advantages, the Americans, for this move towards gold too. And that's why they seem to be pushing this, weakening the dollar. They're trying to keep a weaker dollar so they can rebalance trade and they can rebuild domestic industries. There is going to be short-term pain. They've agreed for that. And they've signed on for this pain. So, this can happen. It's of course going to lead to a lot of, I'm oversimplifying this whole thing because this is a 15-minute video. I cannot break down into every single point and argument and explain it in complete detail. Of course, you'll have lots of arguments into what I'm saying. I'm sure you do. Sadhu's also shaking his head because he furiously wants to ask me many questions. He's waiting for the video to end so he can ask. I'm sure you also have. So you can put it in the comments down below saying where the blind spots are in my logic or what you agree with or don't agree with. And I'll definitely get Anand in and maybe have a discussion with him on this. But this comes to the interesting part. All this is macroeconomic history, a bit of history and a bit of speculation, what is happening, why it's happening. But the nuts and bolts of it is what is going to happen to gold price. Well, the idea right now is gold is going through a new bull phase. Like the bull market we see in the stock market where the prices surge, gold is going through this kind of a bull phase. But it is just not the same as what has happened in the past. The reason is because it is not being used as a hedge against inflation right now. In the past, gold was always looked at as against a hedge against inflation. when inflation goes up or inflation goes down, gold prices move in a certain manner. You don't see that happening anymore. What it seems to be reflecting is, it seems to be reflecting money supply. It seems to be really reflecting the debt crisis that is happening in Europe and in the United States. And it is also showing what the central banks around the globe are moving and doing. So usually when higher the yields, when government borrowing yields become more expensive, gold prices don't move the way they do, but they are moving. So old rules don't seem to be applying. So even if the market corrects or it falls, gold could shoot and move into new price levels. This is what people feel. Do you agree with this? I'm curious to know. Do you think gold is entering a new bull phase because of all what I've said? And or you don't agree? Tomorrow I want to take this a little further, push this discussion a little further and talk about the Genius Act, which was enacted in the US, why that has got something to do with gold, what has Bitcoin and stablecoin got to do with gold, and what is this all got to do with Europe as a whole. How all this is also adding pressure to gold prices. That I want to talk about tomorrow. But so far this conversation has been interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this. So then I'll try and club all those together with my discussion tomorrow, further taking this and talk about that and how crypto and gold, what is the relationship there and what should you be doing when it comes to that. There's something flying around my face. Anyway, so be it. Hope you had a wonderful day. I hope you loved this video, or you didn't like it, tell me why you didn't like it, and I'll try to improve on that. And nothing else more to say from me and Sadhu here in Be Rich today evening. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being with me on Be Rich.